Alrighty, gonna go on ahead and hit record, and we're gonna get this session started. Thank you to all of our attendees and our panelists for taking the time to come on and speak with us today. My name is Brandon DiLorenzo. I'm gonna be helping to moderate some of their Q&A throughout the course of this talk. Now, before we get started, for our campers, I'm sure you've heard this spiel before, but the ways that you'll be able to interact with the panel will be through the Q&A and the chat functions. The chat is for more casual conversation about what the panelists are discussing, and save the Q&A for more formal questions that you would like to see answered live. Additionally, don't forget to check out the Career Explorer Pass program, where you can check off your task lists and complete assignments to gain points and potentially win scholarships and other sport-related apparel. So without further ado, let's go on ahead and introduce our panelists. First off, we have Phil Ofili, who is the Manager of Business Development at Navigate Research. We have Lindsay Santee, who is the Marketing Manager at Populous. And we have Kris, the Director of Business Intelligence at the Vegas Golden Knights. Additionally, we have Megan Meesey, who is our New Jersey Market Lead, and she's going to be helping answer some of those questions in the Q&A that we don't have time to get to live and interacting with you guys in the chat. So now I'm going to pass it on over to Destiny, who's going to start moderating our discussion.
All right. Hey, everybody. Sports Biz Campers from the Sports Biz team. We just want to let you all know that we're very proud of you for taking the steps to develop your career. So thank you for coming to this panel today. So first, panelists, we're going to start off with just some initial questions. What did you want to do growing up? Like, what was your initial career?
I'll start it off here. What's going on, everybody? Thanks for joining. Gosh, when I first started my career, I honestly did not know what I wanted to do specifically. I wanted to be a GM of an NFL team, and then it went going over to be the president of a team. So it's changed over the last couple of years. So, but I landed this great job here with Navigate Research, where we help our clients tell stories through using data when it comes to their sponsorships and different market research for their fans. So really, if there's one tidbit of advice just from the jump here, I'd say stay flexible and always make sure that you change over the times with your plan. So yeah, it's been fun and it's been interesting.
I can go next. I thought I played sports a lot growing up, and I definitely thought I would play basketball at the WNBA, which was wishful thinking on my part. But I also had a big interest in healthcare as well growing up. So I also thought maybe I would go into some sort of, I don't know, maybe be a doctor or something like that. I was all over the place. And then I ended up in marketing. So I kind of blended my love for sports with design at Populous currently.
And then I think for me, I really am all about critical thinking and solving problems. I did not think I would ever work in sports. I ultimately started my career in sports, then left the sports industry, and now ultimately am back. But I think if you try to predict your career path, I think you'll never get it correct. So ultimately, to jump on what Phil said, stay flexible, because again, you don't know what the next opportunity is going to be.
Perfect. So what was your initial break into the sports industry? Like, what was that internship, that first experience that really put you into the sport?
Yeah, for me personally, I kind of got my start into the sports industry a little later than most. During my undergrad collegiate career, actually, I went to the Air Force Academy. So upon graduation, I actually served 6 years active duty. So I got into the industry at about 26, 27. And it was one of those things that, I didn't really know where to go. And luckily enough, I was able to start as a graduate assistant for the Alliance of American Football League. Some of you all might have heard of that. It was like the spring league that came out about 2 years ago before the XFL. And didn't last very long, but it was a chance for me to get in, get my feet wet, and just meet and network a ton. And that's actually, thanks to that opportunity, is actually how I landed this job. So again, you never know where things are going to take you. You can just show up and give 100% effort and see what life brings you from there.
I actually interned for Populous in 2009 when I was in college. So as I mentioned, I had an interest in healthcare. I loved when I worked at Populous. And for those of you who don't know, Populous is a sports architecture firm. We've designed most of the professional sports venues around America, the Yankees Stadium. We designed the Vegas Golden Knights new arena, Allianz Field in Minnesota. So after I interned at Populous, I loved it, but like I said, I still had this interest in healthcare that I felt like I had to explore. So I took a little 5-year detour out of sports, but then came back because it's a great industry. So it's a little bit of my path.
So for my initial start in this industry, I got very lucky through a cold email I sent as a junior during my undergraduate at Arizona State to the SID department. Ultimately, they responded to my email, which was shocking, number one. But ultimately, they offered me a part-time internship that led into a full-time internship that led into a part-time job over a 2-year span. But again, I think it's a little bit about luck, number one, but it's also about taking risks because you don't know what's going to be returned to you. And if you don't end up taking a risk, you're never going to know what the potential outcome can be.
To Kris's point, I'm on the recruiting side of things, and we work with different teams, leagues, agencies, you name it. Taking that risk is one of the biggest things that we see in all levels, whether you're the CEO or looking for an internship. It's just sending a note, sending a cold email. You have nothing to lose ahead of time. So if anything, it's one more connection you can make. And we see that on a daily basis. Our inbox is flooded with those, but I love every second of them. And those are the people that we stay in touch with and remember in a few months or in a few years. So that goes a long way, to his point.
I agree. And so transitioning to your current roles now, if a student was to shadow you per se on a daily basis, what would they see you do?
Wow, that's a good question. Honestly, it changes from day to day, which is why I love what I do. Being able to talk with, on one day, maybe talk with someone like Kris at the Vegas Knights, then the next day talking with someone like Lindsay, or even talking with maybe the chief marketing officer of Nike or Chick-fil-A, who knows, right? So really it's a lot of phone calls right now since we're all stuck at home, but normally it'd be, different cities and then different office meetings in general, just hitting the street and understanding, what potential clients might need, how we can help them with the resources and the data that we can provide, and just building relationships and going from there, because at the end of the day, that's kind of what makes this industry go around. So, but yeah, it's definitely a lot of on-the-spot problem solving. It's a lot of team collaboration across internal people that we're working with, and then also with everyone external too. So it's a mixed bag, but I love it. I really do.
I agree. Right now it's a lot of Zoom calls, but normally it would be a lot of meetings and bouncing around from various strategy sessions. Currently I oversee a team of 15 marketing professionals, and our job is basically anything to do with winning work at Populous and then promoting the work that we win and promoting the work that we design. So we help with proposals and interview decks for pursuits. We lead all of Populous's social media, the website, public relations, data analytics, business development, branding. So it's a mixed bag. Every day is a little bit different, but I agree with Phil. That's definitely what I love about it, is having a hand in everything.
And to Lindsay's point, my day-to-day is very unconventional, to say the least. Every day is completely different from the previous. Ultimately, my job responsibilities, I oversee data analytics, emerging technology, and ventures, not only for the Vegas Golden Knights, but our new AHL affiliate in the Henderson Silver Knights. So ultimately, one day it could be focusing on the Vegas Golden Knights, and ultimately maybe that afternoon it's Henderson Silver Knights. Ultimately, we're just trying to drive efficiency, drive revenue, but also engage our fans and grow our fan base globally, because our motto and what we want to ultimately achieve is to become a lifestyle brand. And ultimately that takes time, but that's the ultimate goal for us here in Vegas.
And I guess to shed some other light, I know that Kris and Lindsay, the perks of also working in the industry and the jobs that we do, we get to go to a lot of cool things too, right? But any game you can think of, whether it's in whatever industry, I know personally, I was able to go to the NBA All-Star weekend in Chicago back in February. I was able to go to Miami for the Super Bowl in general. We had invitations to that. We had there are tons of different things that our jobs have access to. So it's another perk that we kind of get to tap into at the right time and right place. It's not bad at all.
Good to hear. So with you all being in sports data and analytics, what practices and technology, like how do you see that being evolved within the next 5 years in sports and just in everyday life in general? How do you see all that being implemented?
I can kick this off if you guys want.
Sure.
I think data in general is a very powerful, very powerful tool. It's going to tell you a story in one way, positive, potentially another negative, and you're always going to make and build strategies off of that. I think for us, when you think traditional data, I mean, in the past, it was mostly when it comes down to CRM specifically and ultimately dynamic pricing when it comes to ticketing. I think now it's evolved not only from ticketing, you're supporting partnerships, finance, different technologies that can streamline solutions across your entire enterprise. I think data over the next 3 to 4 years is only get more powerful because ultimately there is going to be more of it. But on the counter argument to that, the more doesn't necessarily mean better. It's a matter of how cleansed the data actually is and ultimately how you can structure the data so you can ultimately build those strategies off of that.
And real quick, just for any of our students that are on the call that may not know what a CRM is, would you mind just explaining that real quick?
So a CRM system right now is our customer management system. Ultimately, it will manage all of our customers, ticket holders, partners, single game buyers, and ultimately whoever is not technically a customer but is in our database. That ultimately will have us allow for touch points across emails, phone calls, you name it. It's ultimately for us just to engage our customers, not only for the Vegas Golden Knights, but also the Henderson Silver Knights. I think that's a pretty straightforward answer, I hope.
No, I definitely agree. I think it's going to become more important. I mean, you look at where things are now, even with COVID, and we're all at home. I think a lot of data and a lot of big decisions are being made. A lot of big future decisions are being made right now, trying to figure out how people feel about COVID and what people will need to feel safe to return to, say, stadiums and concerts and venues and different things like that. So I think especially over the next 2 years, data will be huge in telling that story. And then also, as all of you campers begin to get older and become more empowered consumers, you know, everyone's trying to figure out how you think, right? From a Gen Z standpoint, everyone wants to know what makes you tick, what keeps you interested, what gets you through the purchase funnel, becoming, you know, an aware consumer to actually making you want to buy something. So I think as time goes on, you're going to see a lot of companies and a lot of different teams and even different brands too really try to tap into that and try to get inside your head. So don't make it easy on them, you know, make them work for it.
In relation to COVID too, right now, when it comes to different data technologies, we're talking a lot about contact tracing, and basically venues are looking into whether allowing an app that Google or another technology company creates to have access to your phone and look at where you go within the venue and who you come in contact with in case if there is potential exposure down the road to coronavirus when fans are allowed back in the venue. So that's a really interesting, more immediate solution that I think we'll see when it comes to technology advancements in sports, is that helps, you know, ensure that everyone stays safe and comfortable. And if something does happen where unfortunately they come in contact with someone who ends up getting exposed to COVID-19 down the road, at least they will be able to be notified. And so I think that's something that is really cool that'll become a more immediate solution in sports soon.
That's crazy to think about. Just like from your phone, you could just tell that somebody has COVID. But Brandon, do we have any questions from our audience?
Yes, we do. We have a great question from one of our campers named Ram. Ram would like to know what sort of skills you find you're using most frequently within your positions, and what skills and tool sets have allowed you to be successful in your career.
That's a great question. I would say being curious is really important, knowing when to ask questions and not being afraid to ask questions. And then also just being a relationship builder is really important when it comes to knowing who to ask those right questions to, or who to go to if you need help with something. Being curious and eager are great skills to have for your entire career.
100% agree. I think for me personally, it's definitely relationship building and knowing how to work on a team in general. Obviously, I played football at the Air Force Academy, so it's one of those things you always have to know your strengths on a team and know your weaknesses and know when to ask for help. That's kind of helped me in my career along the way. And then also, I love to talk, right? I love to get to know people and understand what makes them tick at the same time, because then that helps me in my role help them. So I think, at least those. I know. I assume you're probably asking for something that's more specific based to the industry, maybe something more data driven, and hopefully Kris can help you out there. But definitely soft skills wise, I think those are two huge points that you can take to any different vertical in this industry.
Yeah, and I think to add some context there, I mean, this is a very, very small niche relationship-driven business. So again, to Lindsay and Phil's point, relationships are key. But you also have your intangible skill set and your tangible skill set. I think generally math is something you're going to use a lot throughout your life, not only in professional setting, but a personal setting. So again, I think it's just a fundamental understanding of different concepts for mathematics. And also, I think from the intangible standpoint, never feel that you can't ask questions. I ask questions probably more than I should, because again, you're always trying to learn, because the more you can learn, the better off you're not only going to be, but the people around you are going to be. And also collaboration. If you're the smartest person in the room, you're probably in the wrong room. So again, collaboration is key, because again, via collaboration is the final product will always be stronger than ultimately that siloed perspective from just yourself.
That's great advice. So thank you for sharing that. We do have another question from Caroline Brickley, and she wanted to know, how has COVID just affected businesses in general, and if you all are involved in any sales or budget processes, like has that impacted anything in that area?
Oh, Caroline, you asked a question that is keeping me up at night right now. It's definitely having an effect. But the thing is, people are trying to figure out what's next, right? Obviously sports are returning right now, but it's for how long? Will you play the full season? Will fans be in the stands? Because obviously you make your budgets and you make your revenue plans based off of certain assumptions. So the fact that you have to plan with that, it will definitely affect some things negatively. It will. It's plain and simple. But it's our jobs in our respective roles and companies in the industry to figure out how to offset that the right way, using data and making inferred decisions and different guesstimations, if you want to call it that, going forward. So it's definitely an issue, but that's why we're here and are employed to figure out how to solve that problem.
One of our favorite sayings right now is, through crisis comes innovation. And it really COVID-19 isn't ideal, I don't think, for anyone, or I know not for anyone, but we are finding new opportunities to talk to our clients. Obviously, we aren't going to be designing stadiums or venues the way we used to in the past. We have to account for things like social distancing, things like people don't want to go pick up their food at the concession stand. They don't want to stand in a line to enter a venue anymore. So how can we get creative in making sure that fans can do that in the future, but do it in a safe way and in a way that makes them feel comfortable? So it's definitely impacted us, but I think we're trying to see it as more of an opportunity for the future rather than a hindrance.
Yeah, to add to Lindsay's point, I think it's definitely an opportunity, and it's also a time where you can go back and kind of look at what your current situation is. From my perspective right now, I'm going through a technology evaluation to figure out, hey, is this ultimately what we want to do going forward, because we have a little bit more time. Also, it's allowing us new innovative ways that we are looking to engage our fans ultimately outside of the arena, just because we don't know, again, when we're going to have fans in our physical arena. So I think from the innovation standpoint, it's been very productive. But from the budget and cash flow perspective, we're deferring a lot of our current payments with our current vendors to next year, to ultimately allow for that cash flow to come back into the business where it's a little more flexible from our day-to-day operational standpoint.
Awesome. Thank you so much. One more question that we're going to pull from the crowd real quick. I'm going to kind of modify Malia Jackson's question. When you first got into your positions, what was something that you found you struggled with, and how did you overcome that?
I can kick this off. This is really easy for me. I think it's, I think the concept of managing up for me was something I had to learn going forward. I think as long as you can make your boss's life much easier, your life will probably be a little bit easier going forward. And I think just the concept of managing up is something I had to learn throughout my career, and I'm still learning now, but I think that's a concept that I would pass along to anybody looking for knowledge in this space.
That's great advice. Mine answer is a little bit more technical because I didn't have an architecture degree. My degree was in marketing. It was really learning. I had to learn a new industry. So I'd come from marketing. I'd also come from healthcare, but that first couple years, there was definitely a learning curve in the architecture world. It's much more technical. There's a lot of acronyms. So it's just taking notes constantly and learning, what the architecture process looks like and what they mean by a CM or a P3. What do all those things mean? So that takes you a while just to catch on to, but once you get the lingo, you're good.
I'd say along those lines, I'd say it has to be asking for help and at the right times. Because in some aspects, it could be, it's delegating something to a teammate or asking someone for help on like, hey, I'm not the subject matter expert on this and I need the help, right? But you try to hold on for it too long to try to figure it out yourself. And it may, bottleneck the process. It may take longer, or it could be wrong after you spend this amount of time doing something. So I think one thing, no matter what industry you get into, it's you don't know what you don't know, and don't hold up the process and ask for help when you need it. And I still struggle with that today, so it's a work in progress. But you gotta be cognizant of things like that.
So some common themes that I heard from you all are definitely persistence, and just your curiosity has just led you to transition into these roles. So for a student that's really interested in data and analytics, what programs, what certifications, what skills can they really hone in on to give them a foot up in this realm?
I get this question a lot, and I personally don't think I'm probably the best individual to answer this, because my background has really grown from a technical standpoint throughout a lot of professional experiences. But ultimately, when I look to hire, this is what I look for. It depends on the role, number one, but also I think from certification standpoint, Tableau from a data visualization standpoint will be something not only sports teams use, general businesses use. So I think that's a hard skill a lot of the younger generation should have going forward. But also I think it depends if you want to become a developer. I mean, I think Python and SQL are two very, very good technical aspects to have. But also, just an understanding of how business works, and that evolves over time. And then also from general CRM perspective, how ultimately the platforms connect with one another and ultimately how to pull reports. And that comes over time. So I know it depends on what program you go through specifically. for an undergraduate situation. But again, I think you can gain a lot of this as you go forward, not only in your professional career, but your personal career as well.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of that, because a lot of our researchers on our end are very, very well versed in Tableau and all the things that Kris was talking about. But what I think they do extremely well, probably the best in this industry, is being able to communicate that data to someone who isn't as well versed in say Tableau or SQL or Python, all these things, right? Because in some cases it seems like a foreign language. Like to me personally, again, I am on the client-facing side. I talk to people for a living, and they do all of the hard research work, right? So, but they do a great job in helping me and other client-facing people navigate to communicate what that means, right? So if you can master all that technical stuff that Kris is talking about, but then also understand how to communicate the right way to whoever you're talking to, you will never have to find a job in your life. It's awesome.
Storytelling is key.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is all very well said. It's all about how you use the data. In our industry, we call it data-driven design. So we use the data to support some of our design solutions. But it's how you work that data into the story that really makes the impact.
Perfect. So these high school students, you know, they're getting a good head start. I know that I kind of just started maybe a year or two ago, and one thing that I've been constantly hearing is about building your personal brand. So what advice would you essentially have on a young high schooler, early college student building their brand? What are some tips and tricks, and what's a successful way for us to do that? Especially, you know, if we don't have essentially experience with very prestigious or well-known companies.
I can kick this off. I think from just a brand development standpoint, it's don't always take the opportunity to learn from somebody. I think my big thing that I've learned is everybody's willing to help you out in one way or another because he or she has been there before. So never feel that ultimately you're being a burden. And sometimes it might take a little bit longer for that individual to get back to you, but never feel that you cannot reach out to him or her. I also think social media has been such a vital component in terms of brand building. If you think it shouldn't be posted, don't post it, because again, it's going to dilute not only the way your social network pursues, I hate to say it, pursues you, but also how your business side is going to be seen. There's a number of people I've gotten down to, probably the last 2 or 3 candidates, and vetted their social media profiles. And ultimately they did not end up getting the job based upon what was seen there. So keep it professional as possible. If you wouldn't post it, don't post it, because again, in one way or another, it's probably going to come full circle.
That's great advice. I agree. Social media definitely helps you build your personal brand. It's also consistency. I think it's really key when it comes to social media and building your brand. And I think ultimately it's all about who you know and just being open to networking, even if it's just with your friends' parents or your friends' siblings. Just ask them about their career. Don't be afraid to ask them questions. Ask them if you can come in and shadow. I think that's how you find out what you like doing, what you don't like doing. Trying to find an internship each summer of college is so important to meet new people and try new things. I think that's really how you start building that career path and building that personal brand and network.
And to jump back in real quick on Lindsay's point, I think a lot of people don't feel comfortable with networking. Sometimes you have to push through it because, again, you don't know what opportunity can come of it. And this is a small niche relationship-driven business, like I indicated before. Everybody knows each other in one way or another, and there's always that next opportunity that presents itself. Without being on that person's top of mind or in their just network, you're already at a loss, because a lot of jobs within this industry come based upon referrals. So networking is uncomfortable, but push through it as much as possible, and over time you'll just get better at it.
Yeah, I agree with all that as well, and I think Lindsay and Kris kind of hit on the head. But I'll say that like your reputation will always precede you, and I can't tell you how many times I heard, the work you do for free will speak more about you than anything else. So when you're in those internships and you're in those maybe those entry level jobs, and you want to be data focused, but they're asking you to maybe be on the marketing team, like whatever it may be. That work will speak volumes about you. So I would say that is how you build your brand, of being a hard worker, a team player, someone who's flexible, all that stuff. So on that intangible side, definitely just always give everything all the effort you have. And then I can't say how many times on the social side, it can be the greatest networking tool possible, but then also like the biggest detriment to your career as well. So just be smart about what you're doing, how you're connecting with people, and use it to your advantage as much as you can.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Kind of shifting tracks a little bit, business analytics has kind of been a buzzword within the sport and entertainment industry over the last 5 years or so. So moving away from skills more to education and background, there's obviously a lot of different paths into these sorts of roles, but what sort of educational background do your organizations like to see, whether it's majoring in business analytics, management information systems, computer science? Could you just tell us a little bit about that?
I guess I'll kick this off. I think those are definitely great areas of focus. I also think statistics is another area of focus. For me, just understanding how numbers work and ultimately going back to the storytelling piece is something that you'll learn over time. But I think if I could go back as an undergrad and evaluate what I could have done better, I would probably focus on more of the statistical route, just because, again, my data is all around statistics in one way or another. So ultimately, just having a fundamental understanding of the statistical side of it, I think, is key from an analytics standpoint. But business analytics by itself is not just data anymore. It's more of a broader scope of data, technology, solutions, things of that nature. But again, I think my short term would be statistics.
I would say like a lot of our team, they again have advanced degrees in analytics, market research in general. They've gone to these secondary degree programs as far as being heavy data focused. So I would say if you were to kind of, I guess, classify it as far as undergrad versus graduate school, I definitely say business focused in undergrad. That's just my personal opinion. And then when you do get the opportunity, if you so choose to go to a graduate program, that's when I would try to specialize in maybe some type of analytics or research-based curriculum if you can.
Yeah, I agree. My job isn't obviously completely 100% data analytics, but we do have a data scientist on the team, and his degrees are in business analytics, which I think has been super helpful. But my background, from a marketing standpoint, I did take statistics. I did take a market research and a market analysis class in college and in my master's. And those, even if you don't want to do data or be a data analyst for your career 100% of the time, those at least will give you a good background to understanding how to use data.
That's a lot. I'm not good with numbers, but it definitely is an interesting field. So what would you say in general, do you feel as though it's best for students to focus all their experience in one area, or should they have a versatile amount of experience? Just from an employer standpoint, does it look, I wouldn't say, I guess, unprofessional? You have one job in stats, and you have a job in marketing, then you have a job here, you have a job there. So what looks best to you?
Man, these are hard questions.
I like the questions though.
Yeah. The best answer I can give depends. It depends on the situation and the career path, because in some aspects, in some instances, like if you just love data and you do not care about becoming, say, a senior vice president of strategy, or maybe a CFO, a chief revenue officer or chief financial officer, just focus on what you want to. But I think personally, if you would like to become a more well-rounded professional, I think you should just broaden your horizon to the opportunities and the interests, but obviously keep that focus in your mind, because I think at the end of the day, when you do progress through the ranks, the most well-rounded people become the leaders of an organization.
Yep, I second that.
I think from my standpoint, again, don't be so narrow scoped. I think my background attests to that. I've had roles in sales, brand marketing, brand strategy, corporate partnerships, CRM, emerging technology, you name it. I think the biggest thing is don't ever say no to specific things, because again, the more you can learn, the more well-versed you can be. And to Phil's point, the more well-rounded an individual is, I think I'd rather have that person because he or she is willing to take on something that's unconventional or untraditional to him or her, compared to somebody who's so narrow focused on one single thing that ultimately, I hate to say it, probably will not be, I think it could be good in a small area, but ultimately growing, say, a team or a business, I think the wider scope is better than the narrow scope.
Perfect. So next we're going to kick it to Brandon for another question.
Awesome. Thank you, Destiny. And we had kind of touched on it earlier, but if you wouldn't mind sharing some of I know you talked about some experiences and whatnot, but do you have any recommendations for students that are trying to get those experiences, resources to look into, and ways to try to educate themselves so that they could be a competitive applicant for those internships where they're trying to get those experiences?
So I can kick this off. I think the easiest piece of this is you have access to the internet. The internet has a ton of information one way or another. If you want to find it, you'll find it. I think it depends on what specific opportunity you want to look for, but the internet will allow you to at least have a fundamental understanding of aspects of that field. But I also think too, the networking piece is something that, again, like a lot of my roles have not come from a traditional just apply. It's usually word of mouth, and it's all that it comes down to work ethic and being able to grow in a way that ultimately makes you a candidate, either internal job or ultimately some type of external job. I've had 4 or 5 different internships, and they finally led to a full-time job in sports. Sports is not the easiest industry to break into collectively unless you want to generally do ticket sales. But again, I think if you want to break into this industry, stay driven and ultimately network as much as possible, but also try to understand what the current landscape looks like.
This also kind of goes back to building your digital brand or your personal brand. I highly recommend, as you all go into college, starting to create your LinkedIn, start connecting with people you know, have a digital portfolio where you can keep work and projects that you work on as you're in college, upload those there. Make it easy for employers to find your experience, to find your skills, and you should be golden.
Yeah, I would say, when it's all said and done, kind of like Kris said, you have the internet, you have all these resources at your fingertips, and you know, like we're talking about, right? Over these next 3 to 5 years, as data will be used more heavily by organizations, you can kind of take it upon yourself to try to solve some of these problems, right? Like you can find all these articles to see what challenges that the industry is facing. So if you're a self-starter and you can maybe hypothesize what, you know, certain things would do, you can build your own portfolio and send it to somebody. Just blast it out to all 32 teams in the NFL or whatever else it may be. And because again, that builds your brand. That shows that one, you are a critical thinker, you're a self-starter, and like you're willing to put yourself out there. So yeah, I would say, yeah. I mean, I think the other day I YouTube, you know, how to install something in our house the other day, and it was just, there's so much information out there that there's no excuse not to just get out there and try to get a head start in front of somebody else. So I'd say just, yeah, get after it as much as you can.
I think the one other piece I would add in here is if you are applying for a internship, part-time job, full-time job, I hate to say it, in sports, you're probably traditionally applying through teamwork at the lower level. Thousands of resumes will come through, ultimately apply, but then follow up with either the hiring manager through research on the team's website or ultimately potentially the individual that you think is hiring that position. Because again, to Phil's point, that shows that you're a self-starter and you're willing to go above and beyond for that potential opportunity.
Yeah, and I think a common thread here is that if you really are passionate about a subject, you should be doing research and trying to educate yourself as much as you can so that that knowledge and passion comes across when you are interacting with some of those hiring managers. And I think Lindsay touched on a really good point on the importance of LinkedIn and informational interviews. And I know that when I was a high schooler, I most certainly did not have a LinkedIn or really any sort of idea of what exactly networking would mean, even if it's just sending a quick message and asking for 15 minutes of somebody's time to sit down and ask some questions about the industry. And for all of our campers, we actually do have a panel on LinkedIn and the importance of creating a LinkedIn and some tips and tricks for building a strong profile at 3 o'clock. So if you guys are interested in learning more about that, make sure to check that out. Destiny, back to you.
Yeah, so since you guys are in data, you're in analytics, you're with the numbers, what does success look like in your position, and how do you essentially measure that?
I can start that. I'd say success for Navigate is our clients meeting their objectives, right? So they come to us saying, hey, you know, we want to increase revenue by 5%, or, you know, we want to engage and increase our Gen Z engagement by 20%, whatever else it may be, right? So a lot of our work and how our success metrics are measured after the fact, after we work with someone and had them utilize the tools and the resources that we give them. So, but along the way, it's like a left seat, right seat partnership. So it's their success is our success at the end of the day. So I'd say it is more, we're more invested throughout the process, but you know, it's great to see a project come to fruition and a client happy.
Success to us is selling a client on a design idea. So it's kind of hard in the design architecture industry. Beauty is really in the eye of the beholder. So I might show you a design that, you know, is the most beautiful ballpark we've ever designed. Phil might love it, Kris might hate it. And that makes it hard when you're pitching people with a lot of money and a lot of investment, right? Of what architect they're going to hire to design their venue. So the one thing that they do all have in common, though, is that they want us to design them a venue that makes them money. And that's really where the data comes in. So if we can tie a certain design idea to data in some way and say that we researched and we know that X number of people will pay X dollars to have an area where they can plug in their phone to charge their phone at their seat, then they might be sold on that idea rather than us just saying, hey, we think you guys should put outlets at every seat. We have to be able to support it with data where we go out and through companies like Phil's, they can help us talk to fans and see what they're really interested in. Or we can say, you know, people would pay $100 for this experience a game. That really sells our clients on ideas. So it really just helps us sell. Honestly, at the end of the day, if we can sell a client's idea and if we have data to support a design solution, then we're usually pretty successful.
And to add to Lindsay's point, I think from my perspective, the one word that keeps coming to my mind is education. As long as you can educate not only the people around you, but your executive team in terms of how this can ultimately affect your business in a positive manner, they'll always be on board. If you ultimately cannot communicate what the data is telling you, they're going to really question, number one, how this is actually going to impact the business. So ultimately just educating the people around you, because again, they're your biggest advocates too, because they know they're separate pieces of the business and ultimately you're supporting it and driving efficiencies, revenue, so on and so forth. But again, if they're not educated, they're not going to generally have a lot of support for what you're doing. But ultimately you have to show the educational piece, because again, I think without that, they're just going to be at a loss for ultimately what data can do from a positive standpoint for every single vertical of the sports organization.
And I know to campers, you guys' roles may seem pretty strenuous, but I'm sure that you all have had some fun. So what's a cool project or campaign that you've worked on throughout the duration of your career that you can share with us?
I have two that come to mind specifically. When I was with Major League Baseball in a very unconventional role, I worked on the Alex Rodriguez steroid case. So I think that was something that I traditionally had no background in, number one. And I think number two, with our current business in Vegas here, we're still under 3 seasons in, so we're still building a lot of infrastructure from scratch. So it's going through the trial and error, the RFP processes, and ultimately trying to figure out what's going to work for us as we become more sustainable and ultimately grow our enterprise going forward here in the Las Vegas Valley.
One of my favorite campaigns or projects I've worked on in the last few years is around esports. Sure, especially with the demographic we have here attending, you all are familiar with esports, but we have started designing arenas and venues to host these esports tournaments and esports games. So that was a fun campaign for me because it was such a non-traditional sport that a lot of people think of as just kids playing in their parents' basement, and that's not the case at all. There's a ton of money in esports. As you all probably know, a lot of the big names like Alex Rodriguez are investing in esports teams. So we recently opened an esports venue down in Arlington, Texas called Esports Stadium Arlington. And then we're also opening a professional venue next year, early next year, for the Philadelphia Fusion, which is an Overwatch esports team. That's a $50 million esports arena. And I think it just shows you that sports are changing and ever growing, and we're adaptive and we adapt with the needs of fans. And I learned a lot learning about esports and how we could best promote ourselves as an esports architect. And then we did a lot of campaigning, whether it was through mail or email, to try to get in front of those who are hiring architects for their esports venues. So that was a fun project where I learned a lot, and it was really rewarding.
Yeah, so tough. Gosh, a recent one obviously was we got the opportunity to work with Lindsay and her team at Populous, which is really cool again because from an applicable standpoint, it's understanding how people feel about COVID right now, and how Lindsay can help her clients adjust their strategy going forward. But another one, gosh, I'd have to say, I'd go.
Did we lose him?
And
Yeah,
understanding.
Hey,
Go ahead.
You cut out there.
It cut out a little bit.
Gosh, this internet. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Good.
Okay, so I'll just fast forward. Basically, we work with the G League for the past 3 years around essentially mining data and helping them interpret it and give best recommendations going forward as to how to improve their business practices. A lot of Tableau, by the way. So again, another plug at Tableau. But all in all, an experience that came from that, we actually got to go and experience Chicago, the NBA All-Star Week in Chicago. So again, it was just one of those things that, through the great relationship that we had with the G League and all the great things we were able to do with them, they invited us out to come have a great weekend. So that was a lot of fun.
Perfect. So it's not all, just paperwork and numbers and all that stuff. You guys definitely have some fun. So we're going to keep it with Brandon for one more question from our chat.
Yes. So we've got a question here from Alex. Kind of ties into the previous question about, kind of a fun, big, exciting project. But what would you say is the most interesting aspect of your job on a day-to-day basis?
I can start. I think for me, it's ultimately my back-to-back days will never be the same. I think it's the opportunity to work on something completely different on a daily basis, and ultimately the opportunity to build something from scratch that ultimately will probably be in place as our infrastructure goes forward, as ultimately the foundation as we grow as an enterprise.
I would say, the ability that we get to talk with different teams, brands, agencies, to broadcasters like ESPN and Fox, all within one day. I can go back-to-back calls with different people, but just again, getting to know them and understanding the problems they're facing and how that impacts the industry. But at the end of the day, I love just helping people solve problems. So I love that aspect of the job and this unique position that Navigate gets to sit in. So I'd say that's definitely the thing that gets me out of bed every single day.
I love that we get to help people usually all of our clients design one, maybe two of these ballparks or these stadiums or these convention centers or these airports in their lifetime. And I love that we get to advise and guide them through that process and help them make decisions to make it what they want it to be, because it's unlike any other process you ever go through in your life. It's a very unique process. And I think our team does a great job of being their business advisors as well as their architects and designers and helping them make really hard decisions that are pretty permanent when it comes to a venue. So that's a pretty cool opportunity.
So Phil touched on it a little bit, and this was actually what I was going to ask you guys. What gets you up in the morning? It could be aside from your job, but I definitely do think that many of our campers during this time will need some motivation. I know that trying to navigate developing a career during this time, it's scary. It's a bit nerve-wracking. So what gets you up in the morning? Lindsay and Kris.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
And well, Phil, you can go again too. I mean, if you have some more powerful words.
What gets me up in the morning? I think it's the ability to create. I think it depends. I look at it in season, it's the ability to create change and create experiences for the community here because they've been so supportive. But it's also from a personal standpoint, the ability to learn a new skill set. I think the more skills you can obtain on a day-to-day basis, the better off you're going to be, not only professionally, but personally going forward.
Mine, I just think about long-term, the impact that these venues have on cities, how long after we're all here, that a lot of times these venues will live on for various communities. They bring in revenue generation, they have economic impact in and around cities. They provide lifelong experiences for people of all ages with their friends and family. And I just think of the bigger picture impact is really cool to have a tiny, tiny, tiny part in that.
And I would add to that, I would say, outside of obviously helping people, I'm a competitive person, and just being competitive with myself and obviously having the goals and the objectives that I want to have, maybe it's weekly or monthly or even, yearly. So I would say that, I'm in competition with myself every day, but then also, our competitors out there too. So if I'm not getting up and getting after it, then, I'm not getting better today. So you just gotta try to stay motivated.
Gotcha. Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. So our final kind of closing question. Think back to when you were in our campers' seats and were about to head into college. What was one thing you wish you had known then that you know now?
And that's the tough one.
I think the importance of relationship building. I knew it was important and I was always pretty good at it, but I don't think I realized how important it was when you get into the business world. And especially when you get into the business world and the sports world, your world gets even smaller because everyone is connected somehow. So kind of like, I think it was Phil who said, your reputation precedes you. Just knowing that even now, and as you're in high school, you're starting to build that brand and build that network, and you can start building those relationships. And I was doing that back then, but I don't think I knew how important it was that I had started doing it back then, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would say to that point about building the network, it's definitely quality over quantity. Obviously, you want to build a robust network as much as you can, but at the same time, you want to fill it with good people in meaningful relationships, because those will go further than anything else, and you'll be able to tell the difference. Being flexible as well as, I think, when I was in high school or just even starting college, it was like, okay, this is my plan and I'm going to get there, and then if something had come up or it just didn't work out, then I'd be like, man, okay, now what am I supposed to do? So understand that things will go wrong, and when they do, just adjust and give that everything you have too. And then I'd say I would tell myself to definitely invest in yourself now and find that balance when it comes to your personal life and your professional life. whether that's mental health, physical health, spiritual, or if you're inclined, or just in general, just make sure that you are your balanced self in general, because at the end of the day, you got one life to live, and be happy. You know, pick a job at the end of the day, you'll be happy doing every single day.
Yeah, and to jump on Phil's point, enjoy the ride. Like, if you try to predict your career path, like, it's never going to happen. So I think the more you can open yourself up for opportunity, you're going to learn what you do want to potentially do and what you immediately don't want to do. So again, I give this advice to people I talk to all the time. Like, you're going to try to predict your future. I tried to do it. I failed miserably. Just enjoy the ride, and every opportunity that presents itself, try to take advantage of it, because again, at some point down the road, it's all going to come full circle.
Preach.
I think that's a good point to end on. So first, I want to thank our industry professionals, Phil, Kris, Lindsay, and Megan, for joining us during this call. I'm sure that our campers got an immense amount of information. I enjoyed the conversation, even though Phil said that the questions were tough. I feel like if I didn't challenge you, especially you guys are in stats and analytics, but our campers definitely appreciate things like this, and our Sports Biz Camps team does as well. So campers, please stay tuned for the rest of camp. We have one more day left, and we also have some chats going on after this. So check your game notes for more content. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
See y'all. Have a good one.
Too.